Welcome to No Room for Phonies.
Everyone is doing the best they can.
Which is episode 63. And you have the green light moment today, finally.
So
I'm asking you for
one. Well, I kind of thought of one this time.
Okay.
So it's important not to say that you are busy when people ask you how you are. I think we pretty much very quickly default to, oh, how's it going? Oh, busy. And I think that it shuts down conversation really quickly for different reasons. It could be, I just don't want to talk about it, so I'm shutting you out. It could be status. Well, look how busy I am. And so it doesn't lend itself to
well, and if that's all you ever say when someone says, how are you, is, oh, I'm so busy.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, well, thanks. That's what you said the last time.
So a green light moment for me is I am going to commit personally to when somebody asks me how I am, to not answer with busy, but to be vulnerable and say something else that is going on, and trying to be positive, because I tend to slide to the negative. So I'll try to.
And everybody is busy doing exactly what they choose to do for the most part.
Yes.
And I mean, everybody has something going on behind the scenes that causes them to have stress or whatever. And if you're not in their circle and they're not,
right, like,
in the same thing for you, if you say, well, I'm just busy or I'm stressed or I'm whatever, like, unless you're actually prepared to say why,
so
it's kind of useless. And it does become a thing. So the book recommendation is Life and Death in Shanghai by Nian Cheng, and it just talks about the culture of she was actually imprisoned
in the 70s.
In the late 60s. She was 70s. Let out. Anyway, it's a remarkable story about communism and what actually happened to some people in China. And so if you don't know much about that history, I would say it's a really good book to read. And then the podcast recommendation, sorry, I'm flipping out of the screen here, is Kate Bowler and Rick Mercer, and I would suggest you listen to it kind of just for fun. It was really a good one. So Kate
Bowler's podcast is Everything Happens. And you can find this episode, I think it was recent.
It was on Spotify, and you can just do a search for it. And I did a little thing about Kate Bowler on social media, or actually on the blog, not too long ago, because I do listen to a lot of her. Everything happens. It's the one where for a reason is crossed out, because I'm kind of done with that philosophy of life that all things work together for good. I think life just happens at times, and I don't think there's necessarily
very random.
It's not necessarily an explanation for it. And I'm not a big prosperity gospel person.
And the other aspect of it, of everything happen or all things work out for good, is that while our human brain always tries to find patterns and answers, hence scientific method and etc., but when we try to hypothesize about why things are happening, particularly bad things, it's not productive. There's no proof.
There's no point. And you can't say, well,
up either guilt or blame or remorse. And
maybe sometimes you can go backwards and say, oh, now I can see why that happened and I can see the reason for that. But what if you can't? What if you actually, like, I think of
sometimes you can say, okay, this decision unfolded this way, but at the time it was the best decision I could make. But a lot of things just happen and it has nothing to do with us.
Well, and I think of some of the real tragedy that I've witnessed with some of my friends over the last year or so. And there's no way I would sit down with that person and say, well, everything happens for a reason. I mean, that would just be devastating to them. So anyway, everybody is doing the best they can. And then there's the little caveat with the resources they have. And I mean, apparently, that sounds like a bit of a cop-out.
At the end of the last... Oh, now it's a cop-out. At the end of the last episode, I was judgy. Now I'm copping out.
Well, I don't mean it's a cop. I think that I'm starting to feel like everybody is doing the best they can with the resources they have is more for me than them.
Yeah.
Like they're just being who they are.
Right.
And whether I, actually feel like
they could do better.
It's more for how I look at the situation than how they are.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. Because people are doing the best they can from their own level of consciousness.
Right.
Some of us we all just see things from our own perspective. Yeah. So, and I mean, I also grew up in a family where you never said, oh, I'm sick or I'm this or I'm that. You just bucked up and you did what you needed to do. So when I look at some people who say, oh, I'm just too sick today to do this or this or this, then I see it from my perspective. And so believing that, they are sick and they need to do what they need to do, then takes it
and just along that line, like giving permission for self-care. You never had that permission.
No.
So you have a hard time.
I never grew up.
You don't do it for yourself.
And I'm learning that it's better, but negative self-talk is actually an exercise in futility. We have to accept where we are and where everybody else around us is. Yeah. So just to be negative and say, oh, do you believe that person and how they're dealing with life? Like, can't they just be this way or that way?
Not really. Because when we are on the receiving end, we don't want people to feel that way.
No, and I mean, and a lot of the way we react to things stems from anxiety and fear, right? Yeah. So you can't really, until you come to terms with that within yourself. Yeah.
And speaking of family, it's really hard to apply this to parents and other family members sometimes to think of that, right?
Yeah. And when you look at someone struggling, you have to accept that they are doing the best they can in that moment, because their current need for security and familiarity outweighs their desire to explore things and change. I think of that in terms of grief and loss, right? You look at somebody and say, oh, it's been 3 years or 4 years or this year or whatever, and they're not ready. So you kind of have to accept.
Well, I don't know who the person was, but Kate Buller was interviewing that other gentleman that lost so many family members.
Yeah, in a car accident.
And he was like, well, it never, it's the first time I've heard it explained so well, where it doesn't go away, but you, I can't remember his words. You experience it differently, or you're not as close to it, and I think that principle of really just accepting, that people are doing the best they can can be very challenging for those of us who push ourselves all the time. Yeah. Particularly, I think. But it's really healing when you apply it to your parents and other family members, like even looking back in history and thinking, when I sometimes think about my father and, all of his, he was doing the best he can from a place of bitterness and, he wasn't very conscious of his feelings or, so was it the best that could be done as a father? No. But was it the best he could do from where he was at and from some of his life experiences? I guess, and then you can extend grace to that person.
Yeah. And if you accept them, then they give themselves self-acceptance and self-love. So it kind of works. And then, then you can get into positive, sustainable changes to our actions and behavior. But unless you accept yourself where you are right now and love yourself for who you are at that moment, it's like that saying that I said many, many times for a while. I'm doing, I'll be better tomorrow than I was today. But today I just have to be who I am. Right. Like whoever that is, because everyone is struggling and life is hard. And that's why your statement at the beginning is significant, because if you just say, oh, I'm so busy, or I'm so stressed, or I'm so this, well, you're kind of inviting someone in, but not.
But also sometimes I know it's just a formality. Hi, how are you? But sometimes, a non-acquaintance, like somebody who's an acquaintance or friend, in that closer realm in that closer circle, might not be the intimate trust circle, but maybe they are reaching out because they want to open up and share something.
Right.
They're willing or trying to be vulnerable, but you shut it down.
And I think that life is just hard for everyone, and our self-awareness does come at a cost, right? Because you have to delve into yourself, and you have to see
the ugly side,
and you have to accepting who you are, right, comes at a cost. You may have lost something you can't get back. You're diagnosed with some kind of chronic pain or disease, and your family falls apart and things have never been the same. Like, accepting that,
there's a cost.
Yeah, there's a cost to that. And I think I've given up long ago that the myth that a good life is a life of happiness, right? That you walk among, because we are in fellowship with those, everyone is afflicted with something.
Yeah.
So
the Facebook, Instagram lies are really just a myth.
Yeah. And I think we have to have these ever widening circles of empathy and existential courage, and, that get you back up after you fall. Otherwise.
And I would say sometimes we also naturally just kind of take a holiday from some of this self-introspection and
yes.
Sometimes you need to coast just a little bit to rest because it's a hard work.
Right. But then I think when you sort of rise above things courageously, you find that there is joy in that rubble of life.
Yes.
But it's sustained joy. It's not that, woohoo, I love this bottle of wine, happy, I can't believe I have this great bottle of wine.
No.
It's that peace, joy, kind of a thing that comes from, like, flowers that grow in cracks of sidewalks, where you kind of go, wow, how did that happen?
Right.
And so then you start developing these virtues of joy and whatever by being gracious with yourself and others, kind of a thing. And when we struggle, we're always in good company, because everyone struggles. And I don't mean to say that you should...
But people do feel lonely because of how friendship, society, the internet, everything is kind of...
Yeah. And I think the uncomfortable... I love Kate Buller's one book where at the end she goes, what not to say to somebody who's struggling with something
really terrible.
Really terrible. Like,
what did
have you heard of this?
The offering advice?
Or have you heard of this? Or have you tried this? Or, I think we just forget that we're not, like, she has a very serious story. Form of cancer, and someone saying to her, oh, have you tried oil of oregano? Like, you think if oil of oregano was the magic cure, that everybody'd be having it, right?
Well, I'm guilty every once in a while, not for serious things, but for other slighter afflictions.
Yeah, and I've taken...
have you gone off gluten?
Yeah, no. I know.
Well, that's because gluten...
Have you got yourself checked out, though, isn't a bad thing to say to somebody who's struggling with pain or...
Yeah, that would
right?
be... Yeah.
So all I'm saying is that my life, not necessarily theirs, but my life is better when I assume that people are doing the best, because it keeps me out of judgment and it lets me focus on what is and not what should or could be.
Right.
It just is.
It is.
And, that person is doing the best that they can. How can I support them? How can I listen to them? And my best was less than what I know I'm capable of. But sometimes it's the best that you're capable of doing in that moment. You're tired, and the whole idea of feeling self-compassion and assessing your own toolkit that you're working with and saying, wow, I don't think I did the best I could in that moment, but if I worked on this and this and this, I could have handled that better. Right?
Because we have that toolkit. We know about some of those things.
And then that's where you write what needs to be righted, and you grow from there. And then you take that same approach with others. And I think what is frustrating for us is lack of self-awareness in others. And I think that's where judgment comes in a lot, right? Because you look at somebody and say, how can they not be aware of how they came across? So.
Yeah, because we have worked on our, oh, wow, I really came across that way.
Yeah.
So.
But, yeah.
Not that we do it perfectly or every time. Either.
So. Yeah, so I have asking the question today, sometimes just showing up is the best you can do, and is that okay?
I think it's okay to just show up.
Like sometimes you're
just there, you listen.
Do you have to explain that to people all the time?
No.
Yeah, I think it depends what your role is, right? Like
what do you mean? That you're explaining that you're just showing up?
If you're the leader of something and you're having a bad day, it's okay to say, today I'm here. That's all I am.
That's what I can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that vulnerability is important.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think it helps people to understand. And some people will react whatever, but some people might actually say, so what can I do to ease your load?
Or just, oh, she's human too. And, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly leads into the next question. Are you doing the best you can if you're not living up to everyone's expectations for you?
Oh, that's hard.
You know, and I think that's where we have to have our own kind of.
Well, just have that thermostat thinking through, am I doing what I'm doing because I'm trying to live up to somebody's expectations?
Right. And I mean, just being able to say to somebody, I understand that's what you expect of me, but this is where I am.
Yeah.
Like, I think that could really help people in marriages where there's or partnerships where, you know, someone isn't living up to whatever that expectation was for you, where you say, I actually am doing the best I can.
Yeah.
I hope to get better, but maybe you need to just kind of make your expectations a bit more reasonable,
wait
right?
Around a little bit. Yeah.
If you take risks and fail, you are still doing the best you can. Perfect is not doing the best you can. Striving for excellence and seeking out new experiences and growing is doing the best you can. So if you're not doing that, then maybe you're just not able to at that moment. Right. And I mean, I think I'm going to be honest. The place where I found that the most frustrating was when I was a supervisor of people teaching, and kids were suffering because someone was not able to
do the best those kids needed.
Yeah. And so therefore, that was when I would say things like, do you need some time off? What can I do? I can see you're struggling. Like, there are certain reasonable expectations that you have to meet.
Yeah, sometimes there just are.
Right?
Well, I mean, as a teacher, I'm not thinking of my students, but thinking of other areas in the college, for example, paramedics, there are a set of expectations they have to be able to do to pass a course or an assignment. And if not, they're not safe to be paramedics.
Well, and the thing is, because teaching, and this is why I found the profession a bit frustrating, I find teaching life or death.
Yes, because children's lives are
and people's lives, like their understanding and their growth and everything. And education is what drives change in the world, and compassion and thinking and critical thinking and all that stuff. So I really felt strongly about that, but not everyone saw that.
Some people, it was just a job.
And I mean, accepting help from others and admitting you are struggling, is that all part of doing the best you can? And how do you admit that? And, you know.
Yeah, well, I guess that's part of what Brene Brown would call the the rumble or coming out of the arena or whatever.
Yeah, and Seth Godin says it too, go make a ruckus,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That there's a struggle to things changing, and, you know, you can't always have people feeling comfortable, right?
Yeah, it's not neat and tidy.
No. So that's where I think everyone's doing the best they can, so we have to accept that. But then in the circumstances of, well, I'm your boss
Mm-hmm.
and I need this done.
Yeah. Then these are my expectations,
Which
and they
are-
have to be.
And I'm saying to you, how can I help you? Then you better, as a person, be able to say, hey, I'm really struggling. I need help with this. I don't
Or I really need to bow out.
Right. So, and I think sometimes we forget. I always tried as a principal to celebrate small wins and never pretend to know something that I didn't know. I think that's really important. And just because you're self-righteous and superior doesn't mean you're doing the best you can. Just throwing that one out there. Because just because you're the loudest voice in the room, or you're the voice in the room that always reminds people of this, that, or the other thing, doesn't mean, oh, and by the way, remember, doesn't mean that you're doing the best you can. It means that you maybe have lost sight of everybody else is doing the best they can, and everybody else has choices that they can make. And sometimes you don't have permission to speak into somebody's best they can. Right? I think another thing is working on health and fitness and staying connected to people and having that group of people that can give you honest feedback, and feeling the best you can mentally and physically helps you do the best you can.
Do the best you can.
And to say, you know what, I'm just not at my best physically today, and maybe I just need a couple of days of rest, like just all those pieces.
Right.
And I think sometimes,
Or if it's time sensitive, you know what? I think we could talk about this on a walking meeting outside. Let's go for a walk together.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that.
I mean, I know in the West Wing they just kind of went around the hallways,
I know.
but going outside would be good.
Well, and I think also knowing what you want and setting priorities and engaging with purpose and intention helps you do the best you can. Because if you're kind of, okay, this is my clear path, and you keep coming in with all these little, and I can finally say to you, no, you know what? I'm on this path and I'm happy with this path, and I don't quite understand or get. Like, I had that happen to me about the podcast one time. I had this person kind of parachute in and say, oh, I've got some things I want to talk to you about with your podcast. And it wasn't a person that I really trusted.
I remember
for that. Like, was not in my, trust
very,
circle.
very parachuting in.
Yeah. And I was like, I just want to clear a few things up with you. And I was like, no, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
And that's okay, I think, to say that, right? Because you've got to gather positive people around you and get rid of some of the things that just aren't necessary in your life. Like even physically decluttering your environment and let going of friendship situations and all those kinds of things. I mean, the physical decluttering for me is easy. I could physically declutter this office right now, and it would make me very happy.
It's all off camera.
I just stay away from it because
But look at that beautiful
every once in a while
behind us.
I did that.
I know.
If you turned a little to the left, you would understand why I would want to declutter. But anyway, not going down that road. But it's much harder for me.
I'm not doing my best.
To let. Well, you're doing the best you can.
No, not really.
It just,
I could do better.
And I have learned over the years that I just let certain things I let go, and then it gets crazy, and then you get frustrated with it, and then we go through it. But that's fine, whatever. But I have a lot harder time letting go of friendships and not feeling responsible for what's happened in the friendship. Because
and
then
I start saying, okay, it's time to let go, and it's okay, and
right, because then I blame myself for it, and I think, well, I haven't done the best I can, you know, and I always
and it's tricky because we are both of the, you know, if there's a problem between two people, both parties have something to play with it. It might not be 50-50, it might be 5-95, but that's where we blame ourselves for being. Well,
and I also believe that every problem can be solved because everybody can reasonably sit at a table and take responsibility for their piece of it. And we can, and I've learned that everybody is doing the best they can. And sometimes it just doesn't include that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, giving back and making a contribution and continuing to learn about what compassion and empathy really are have helped me to accept that everybody is doing the best they can. And I sometimes think that you as a person think that people are out to get you more than they ever are. Right. Particularly if you have that rejection bias that I have.
Yeah. And then the imaginary conversations about those type of scenarios.
Right.
Yeah.
Which you have to know yourself intimately and understand and manage your own feelings, which is where we, you know, have really, Atlas of the Heart is the one that I highly recommend, but you're reading one about feelings too.
Yeah. Permission to feel.
Yeah.
That's very, very good.
So I think we have to really come to terms with understanding and managing that our feelings are way more than mad, sad, glad.
Yeah, that's definitely Atlas of the Heart.
Like gold. There's 3 or 4 feelings that we all say, oh, I'm mad, oh, I'm sad, oh, I'm glad, or I'm happy.
But if we had the nuances of all the different angles of it. It
does really help you to understand yourself better.
Yeah.
Because sometimes your sadness is just fear or anxiety.
Or sometimes it's just being alone,
and the lonely. Difference between being disheartened and disillusioned and you know, there's a whole bunch of things that, you know, devastated as compared to disappointed.
It's interesting because when I was a kid growing up, I was never allowed to say I'm bored. I would get in trouble for that, but I'd get grounded for saying oh, I'm so depressed. My father would just lay into us if we talked like that. And I know the younger generation still kind of talks like that very quickly, drops those labels. And I think it's just another too much of an umbrella for what's actually going on.
Well, and her thing about boredom, Brene Brown, is that boredom is your mind pushing out creativity, right? It's actually a good thing to be bored because then you push out.
Yeah. Well, you know, if we ever said that, we usually were saying that because we wanted to turn on the TV, but it was very limited amounts of TV we had. So it's no, you can't be bored if you can't find something fun or interesting to do, I'll find something for you. So we would go find something to do.
Well, your creativity then would come out, I guess, right?
I think so, yes.
So I guess finally you have to give yourself the benefit of the doubt, and then you have to give everyone else the benefit of the doubt, and not to take things personally, because usually it's not even about you. It's about where the person is at.
Yeah.
And look for the good. In every human being there is both garbage and gold, and it's up to us to choose what we want to pay attention to. And I think that's hard.
It's hard.
It's very hard.
Particularly in online discussion groups.
Yes. Yeah. Looking for the good in others as well as in life and in ourselves is one of the best ways to find things to appreciate and be grateful for. And we know that gratitude by research helps us. Yeah. Focusing on gratitude, it does change the synapses in our brain.
It changes our overall health.
And this idea of seeking first to understand and this idea of being curious has come up so much in the research now.
But also we've been listening to a podcast or seeing even a TV show or a news report, and then the word curious is there.
Yeah.
It's very
that idea that we need to be curious about each other so that we can try to understand each other. I mean, when we think of all the bad things that are happening in the world, if people had stepped back and just been curious about each other and tried to work things out, how differently, and sought to understand. And I guess the fine little thing is to be gentle and kind with others, and especially with yourself. If you're
kindness could achieve a whole lot of things.
Yes, if you're kind to yourself first, then you have grace. You have enough room to have grace for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, everybody is doing the best they can.
That's all for episode 63. Thank you for joining us.
Wait, May 15th.
Oh,
to
sorry.
list or not to list? That is the question. He doesn't, I do. So we're going to have a little
Did you
debate.
hear that? Did you hear that? So
We're going to have a debate.
we are. And
Why don't you? Why do
and you're
I?
going to be very curious as to why
Yes, I am. I'm going to be very curious about it.
And kind.
So curious and kind.
and gentle.
And I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But anyway, we'll
benefit of something else.
We'll save all that for next time. So thank you for joining us. And remember, be gentle and kind with others and especially with yourself. And everybody is doing the best they can in the moment that they're doing it.
Absolutely. See you in the next episode.
May 15th.